Imagine a seed taking root, fueled by generations of passion and purpose. That's the story of Aboitiz Foods. Born from the powerful union of Pilmico and Goldcoin, more than just a business move, it is a promise of growth and innovation. Pilmico, with its unwavering dedication to quality, provided the foundation. The flour that feeds families and the feed that strengthens livestock. Gold Coin, a pioneer in animal nutrition, added the scientific expertise that unlocks the full potential of every grain and feed ingredient. Welcome to Aboitiz Foods, where tradition meets innovation and legacy meets evolution. Our journey is woven with the stories of over 3,700 partners. A multicultural tapestry united by a common thread: integrity, teamwork, innovation, and responsibility. We are agile, adaptable, and deeply proud of the role we play. Our mission is simple yet profound: to be the heart that sustains Asia's growth. From the first grind of the mill to the nourishing meal on the table, this massive purpose fuels our every action. We are the stewards of a sustainable future. With our vast network, we believe in growing alongside Asia, constantly refining our processes to create a seamless value chain. Expertise and cutting-edge technology are the tools we use to deliver the quality that feeds generations. Our commitment, together we nourish the future, encapsulates the collaborative spirit and shared responsibility that defines our approach to business. We strive to work hand in hand with our stakeholders to build a better, more sustainable future. Guided by these principles, integrating for efficiency. Building expertise for quality. And looking ahead to serve you better. We are not at the beginning of the food chain. We are at its core. We add value at every step because we believe that nourishing people nourishes potential. At Aboitiz Foods, we are more than a company. We are a movement. We are a community of passionate individuals working together to cultivate a brighter future, one nourishing meal at a time.
By 2030, the world population is estimated to reach 8.7 billion people. As the global population grows, so does the demand for protein-rich food. The aquaculture industry offers a wide range of protein-rich seafood, which provides us with a well-rounded and nutritious diet. In the Asia-Pacific region alone, it has significantly grown over the past few years. And what they need is a reliable partner dedicated to nurturing their path toward a more sustainable future. Pilmico and Gold Coin has proudly served as a partner for growth of fisher folks in Asia for over 40 years. A pioneer in manufacturing scientifically balanced animal feeds, Pilmico and Gold Coin continuously provides consistent quality feeds and total solutions to nourish the growth of the aquaculture industry. Our journey began in 1984, venturing into aqua feeds. And today, our influence spans 9 cutting-edge facilities across 5 countries: the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and China. We are committed to providing value to our customers through our premium quality feeds that nourish aquatic life. Our fundamental principles are quality, service, and innovation. Our feeds are formulated with carefully selected raw materials that are safe and nutrient-rich. Our products are designed to support aquatic animals of various species in achieving their peak throughout every stage of their lives. Our feeds are also enriched with essential nutrients to bolster their immunity and improve overall water quality and stability. Our feed mills use modern and advanced equipment to ensure our feeds meet the highest standards of quality and performance. We make sure we adhere to international quality standards from our facilities to our manufacturing processes. More than just our feeds, we also provide technical and after-sales services to guide the growth of our customers' aquaculture business. We find solutions and provide our technical expertise to our partners no matter where they may be. Our Aqua Mobile Lab brings our laboratory experts within our partners' reach. Together with our partners, we can unlock endless possibilities. We believe innovation is the key to the industry's growth and progress in the future, and we are committed to shaping the future of the aquaculture industry. As we look forward, we continue to uphold sustainable aquaculture, preserving marine life, nourishing the lives of millions, and growing with our partners.
Imagine a seed taking root, fueled by generations of passion and purpose. That's the story of Aboitiz Foods. Born from the powerful union of Pilmico and Gold Coin, more than just a business move, it is a promise of growth and innovation. Pilmico, with its unwavering dedication to quality, provided the foundation. The flour that feeds families and the feed that strengthens livestock. Gold Coin, a pioneer in animal nutrition, added the scientific expertise that unlocks the full potential of every grain and feed ingredient. Welcome to Aboitiz Foods, where tradition meets innovation and legacy meets evolution. Our journey is woven with the stories of over 3,700 partners. A multicultural tapestry united by a common thread: integrity, teamwork, innovation, and responsibility. We are agile, adaptable, and deeply proud of the role we play. Our mission is simple yet profound: to be the heart that sustains Asia's growth. From the first grind of the mill to the nourishing meal on the table, this massive purpose fuels our every action. We are the stewards of a sustainable future. With our vast network, we believe in growing alongside Asia, constantly refining our processes to create a seamless value chain. Expertise and cutting-edge technology are the tools we use to deliver the quality that feeds generations. Our commitment, together we nourish the future, encapsulates the collaborative spirit and shared responsibility that defines our approach to business. We strive to work hand in hand with our stakeholders to build a better, more sustainable future. Guided by these principles, integrating for efficiency. Building expertise for quality. And looking ahead to serve you better. We are not at the beginning of the food chain. We are at its core. We add value at every step because we believe that nourishing people nourishes potential. At Aboitiz Foods, we are more than a company. We are a movement. We are a community of passionate individuals working together to cultivate a brighter future, one nourishing meal at a time.
By 2030, the world population is estimated to reach 8.7 billion people. As the global population grows, so does the demand for protein-rich food. The aquaculture industry offers a wide range of protein-rich seafood, which provides us with a well-rounded and nutritious diet. In the Asia-Pacific region alone, it has significantly grown over the past few years. And what they need is a reliable partner dedicated to nurturing their path toward a more sustainable future. Pilmico and Goldcoin has proudly served as a partner for growth of fisherfolks in Asia for over 40 years. A pioneer in manufacturing scientifically balanced animal feeds, Pilmico and Goldcoin continuously provides consistent quality feeds and total solutions to nourish the growth of the aquaculture industry. Our journey began in 1984, venturing into aqua feeds. And today, our influence spans 9 cutting-edge facilities across 5 countries: the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and China. We are committed to providing value to our customers through our premium quality feeds that nourish aquatic life. Our fundamental principles are quality, service, and innovation. Our feeds are formulated with carefully selected raw materials that are safe and nutrient-rich. Our products are designed to support aquatic animals of various species in achieving their peak throughout every stage of their lives. Our feeds are also enriched with essential nutrients to bolster their immunity and improve overall water quality and stability. Our feed mills use modern and advanced equipment to ensure our feeds meet the highest standards of quality and performance. We make sure we adhere to international quality standards from our facilities to our manufacturing processes. More than just our feeds, we also provide technical and after-sales services to guide the growth of our customers' aquaculture business. We find solutions and provide our technical expertise to our partners no matter where they may be. Our Aqua Mobile Lab brings our laboratory experts within our partners' reach. Together with our partners, we can unlock endless possibilities. We believe innovation is the key to the industry's growth and progress in the future, and we are committed to shaping the future of the aquaculture industry. As we look forward, we continue to uphold sustainable aquaculture, preserving marine life, nourishing the lives of millions, and growing with our partners.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of our Agriconnect series, Aquavantage. I'm your host, Alan Wu, and we'll be with you all throughout these enlightening episodes. Before we proceed to this insight discussion, I would like to request our local representative to translate language to the local language and make sure that all our customers understand. And this seminar is an exclusive event, may include confidential information that belongs to Aboitiz, Fimico, and GoCoin, and our respective speakers. So please do not disclosure out of the seminar. And for your convenience, we provide the meeting link with the subtitle with 4 languages: Vietnamese, Bahasa, Mandarin, and of course English. So you can scroll down to the footer. You can select the language that you prefer. To ensure everything will go very smoothly, try to confirm you have very strong internet connection and stay muted all the time when you don't speak, and keep your camera on and try to more engage in our webinar. And if you have any questions, concerns during the seminar, please feel free to use the chat box. Our local team will monitor the chat box and address the questions you're asking. For safety protocol, feel free to report any safety concerns throughout, again, the chat box. Make sure that you know where is the nearest the fire exits. Now we cover the technical reminder, safety protocol, and let's dive to our Aquavantage events. The first topics highlight the global shrimp prices, demand and supply, which will be discussed by Mr. Novel Sharma. He is the analyst of seafood and aquaculture of the Rabobank, Netherlands. Let's welcome Mr. Novel Sharma.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Novel Sharma. Before I get into my presentation and the meat of my presentation, I do want to thank everyone for organizing this event. It's a great way for everyone to get to share insights, see what's happening in the market, share opinions, because we are in a time where it's hard to know what's going to happen. So especially when it comes to shrimp. And the phrase I like to use, it's called mixed recovery on the way. And the main question that's on everyone's mind is, has the bottom been reached because of improving Western demand, or is this just the new normal? So I'm going to get into this, later on in my presentation. But before I begin, I would like to talk a little bit about our bank. So as I said, my name is Novel Sharma. I work as an analyst at Rabobank, covering the global seafood value chain. I think most people here are probably aware about our bank and what we do. If you're not, Rabobank is a global food and agriculture and energy transition bank. I sit in the Rabo research team, which is the research and advisory division. We have over 100 analysts globally covering various pillars of food and agribusiness. In animal protein, we have pork, beef, poultry globally. We have a farm inputs team, grains and oilseed supply chain, packaging. Whatever is related to food and agriculture, we cover those sectors. And when it comes to seafood, we truly have a global presence. If there's what I like to usually say is that if there's any sort of fish or in the water, whether it's in the sea, in a pond, in a lake, there's a high likelihood that we have some sort of a relationship there. We have some sort of a network there. We have clients in New Zealand, all the way in Patagonia and Alaska. So yeah, we have established ourselves truly as a global seafood bank as well. Now, I'm going to get into the meat of the presentation. The presentation might be slightly different than what maybe some people in the audience might be used to. We come from a angle as an economist, as an investor. So it's not really a technical presentation of how you should farm and things like that. Our job is to understand the dynamics, the levers, what's driving prices, what's driving demand, what's driving supply. And covering the whole seafood value chain, what it allows us to do is see correlations and relationships and see what might happen. So at this point, I don't know how much coffee everyone has had, but brace yourself, because as a banker, it's a curse and a blessing that we like to use charts and information. So I hope everyone's ready. Now, before I get into shrimp, I wanted to show this slide because there's been some sort of adjustment that we've been seeing. Now, if you look at the previous results and forecasts from the OECD FAO, seafood as a category was supposed to be, or expected to be, the fastest growing category from a production standpoint for the next 10 years. However, recently this has changed. And there were a lot of questions about why, but this was almost expected. Now, if we separate seafood into aquaculture and wild catch, aquaculture still remains is expected to be the fastest growing animal protein from a production standpoint. But recently, poultry has also shown really good growth. And the wild catch there's going to be relatively stable, either a minor decline or no growth at all. So while for quite some time, aquaculture was forecasted to grow at roughly 2.3% over the course of the rest of the decade, this has come down to around 2%. And one of the reasons here is also is China. And China, which tends to dominate low-value carp production, is almost entering a pivot point, something that a lot of developed nations tend to have, where they become more consumption-focused than export-focused, and they start moving to higher-value sectors. So where we even see consumers are starting to diversify their seafood choices. If we just look at trade numbers of China, the trade value growth that China has experienced over the last 5 years or so is good, extraordinary, and it has become almost a net importer, while historically speaking it was a net exporter. So this diversification, higher income elasticity benefits the high value species consumption, for which China does not have much. So whether it's low value carp production or tilapia, they're losing competitiveness there. So that's something that might reduce in production or remain slow down in growth. Now we'll get into the trade aspect of things. Shrimp has been one of the best, if not the best performing animal protein from a trade value standpoint. You'll see here I have beef, pork, salmon, and other categories as well. And since 2018, the sector has grown substantially. And the only comparable from a trade value standpoint in the seafood space is salmon, and both have grown at nearly 5%. However, the sectors are very, very different. And this is something you hear a lot, where people tend to compare shrimp and salmon, the sectors, but they are so different and you can't really compare them. Prior to 2023, the growth that the shrimp experienced from a trade value standpoint positioned it as the most traded seafood category from a value standpoint. In 2022, it eclipsed 26 billion. So if we just take out 2023, and from 2013 to 2022, the shrimp trade value grew at a annual rate of 8%. However, the question is, what happened? 2023 was a very, very tough year for the shrimp industry from a trade value standpoint. It experienced a decline of 13%, and it's currently at 22 billion. So that means there's a $4 billion loss. So if we take out 2022, this peak, or we treat it as an anomaly, the trade value remains above the pre-pandemic levels of 2019 of around 20 billion. So despite suffering in 2023, if we just zoom out a little bit, overall it has grown. And the question is, it's a mix of both volume and value. However, in 2023, China played a huge role in driving the growth, but we'll get into it later. As I said earlier, the only comparable is salmon. But salmon is very different. It has large players, more consolidated. Shrimp, despite the size from a trade standpoint, is relatively young, and it probably only has 10 years of proper industrialization. So while salmon is relatively mature, shrimp remains a growth sector, but it still has not experienced the full extent of efficiency gains or technology. And there's still a lot of room for consolidation, tech implementation, which will probably eventually lead to more predictable margins for the sector. And unlike salmon, it does not have the same restrictions from a legislative standpoint to grow. So what happened in 2023? What is going to happen in 2024? The key questions are the prices at the bottom? Is this the new normal? Or what will be the driver of the rebalancing of the markets? Will it be demand growth or supply decline? Zooming in a little bit more on shrimp, as I said, good growth. The industry added 6 billion from 2020 to 2022. However, 2021 was the best year for the sector. We saw 4 billion added in trade, and one of the reasons for this growth was this newfound retail consumption in the West, in particular the US, which was the main driver. This, in the COVID-induced at-home consumption, consumers were looking to diversify their protein choices, and this moved the demand function upwards. Now, in 2021, import volumes grew at 20% for the US, while value grew at 23%. EU also showed good growth, and US established itself as the largest importer in 2021. But things have changed, and all these three markets, EU, China, and US, are the three most important, are very, very different. as mentioned earlier, US hit peak volumes in 2021, continued importing till the first half of 2022, when import was still good. However, importers may have mistaken how sustainable the demand was, which led to high inventory levels. In a way, we believe there was some level of speculative imports where importers believed that the actual demand would be a lot higher than it actually was. And that's why I do not compare 2023's performance with the peak that US experienced. I think a better benchmark is to probably compare it to pre-pandemic levels and whether or not it's still growing. China, on the other hand, experienced substantial jumps in imports in the second half of 2022 and first half of 2023, where it reached in peak volumes. And the driver for this was the reopening of the economy and the pent-up demand. And huge imports started being shipped to China. Now there's a political angle, and there's an angle about what the demand is. We do believe there was a lot of the imports that were happening in China were speculative, and prices crashed. So a lot of Chinese importers were buying up, and they also are experiencing an oversupply situation. And we think the thing that it happened in the US in 2022, beginning of second half of 2022 and first half of 2023, where there was a substantial reduction in softening of demand. This might happen in China as well, maybe not to the extent that it happened in the US, but this is something that we have to keep an eye on, and this is going to play a huge role in the recovery of the prices. Now, this is just looking at the halves. I gave a little bit of narrative in the previous slide. US 3 consecutive halves, very good growth. Substantial drop was they started experiencing in the second half of 2022 and 2023 as well. But China, when US demand was softening, China came back, absorbed much of the supply growth that was coming out of Ecuador. Ecuador kept growing, and China was able to just import more. So in a way, it can be considered a blessing that it prevented further mitigation or further decline of the prices. But we do think it's hard to maintain. For China, it's hard to maintain these peak imports. There's a lot higher inventory levels. So what's happening? Now, it seems like things have flipped again. While US is gradually recovering, EU is stable, China is declining. And this is trade data from the first 5 months. US shrimp market is improving gradually with low prices and availability. There is an expanding retail footprint that probably signals that there might be improved demand later on this year. China absorbed quite a bit, but again, the question is how speculative were the imports, and it seems like China is slowing down to some level. And even though China is importing volumes, the demand recovery that we saw post reopening and post COVID has not materialized in the sense that it has not led to any price recovery. So China is always it's an unknown variable, and we do think some softness is expected and might lead to some sort of normalization. And when we talk to our colleagues in China, and they've mentioned that consumer sentiment is not great, and especially after the recent concerns about the housing market. And even if there's a stimulus provided by the Chinese government, it's unlikely that it will lead to a substantial boost in demand. So while we do not expect a substantial decline in the Chinese demand, it is unlikely that we'll see the same level of speculative shrimp imports that occurred in 2023 for 2024. And the question here is that the reason China is so important is because if China starts importing substantially less and US is only gradually recovering and the supply is not adjusting, the prices will decline again. It's just economics, the demand and supply gap. So what do we think is happening and what might happen? First of all, let's get into prices. The global shrimp industry is exiting one of the worst periods in its history. It's experienced low prices that were unseen for a decade. And combined with a lot of the high costs due to El Nino induced shortages for fish meal, made many farming regions unprofitable globally. Now, for Asia, the hit was probably harder because a lot of these farmers are smaller and they did not have the same ability to withstand a prolonged periods of unprofitability. Now, the shrimp industry, on the other hand, uncertainty, low prices, weakening demand, and as I said earlier, the key phrase is rebalancing of the markets. The oversupply situation is accompanied by weak demand, and it for the last year or so, which has made the majority of the industry unprofitable. 2024 is going to be a very, very pivotal year, and there is a chance, and there are some signs showing that we might be reaching an inflection point, but this is dependent on two factors. Again, scale of supply reduction and recovery in demand. There was a temporary upward shift in the demand function in 2021, which was good, but once inventory is built up, there was a gradual release. I think from what we're hearing is that inventory levels are normalizing in the US, and in early, the first half of 2024, it seems like the West seems to have reached a bottom and is now gradually normalizing. Also consumer sentiment is improving, and it's partly due for the inflation impacted Western demand is no longer contracting, and also there's a level of lower supply coming from key producers in Vietnam and Indonesia. However, again, global price recovery is tentative. We do think it will gradually improve. If people expect it to substantially improve, I think that's unlikely. The pivot we're seeing is more of a gradual pivot, and more. Additionally, the industry is breathing a sigh of relief as the imposed tariffs in the US, while unwelcomed, are not as high as initially feared. And the full impact of the anti-dumping and countervailing duties will be seen in the second half of the year. And also, feed costs are normalizing. So it seems like there is going to be more potential for profitability for some farmers. And this might improve the situation towards the second half of the year. Now, this is something we do. This is a relative index. And we do not like just looking at shrimp from a nominal price standpoint. We try to compare it with other animal proteins and create an index for the relative expensiveness or cheapness of the product. So the idea is the consumer walks in. If we have this hypothesis, walks in and is looking to buy some protein or meat for dinner or something, the relative price point, I believe, between its substitutes and shrimp plays a bigger role than I think just the nominal price of the product. Now, what you'll see is that, relatively speaking, on a wholesale level, the prices have declined substantially. And it's been relatively cheap for the last 3 years. And even at points where the prices of shrimp were really high in 2021, it was still relatively cheap. And so the question is, why is this not boosting demand? Why is this not causing a price correction? Shrimp is cheaper for the eyes of, in the eyes of a consumer. Why aren't they buying more? Well, the same index we do at a retail level, and you'll see the immediate difference. While the wholesale index was declining substantially, the retail index hovers around that same point. So the prices, the relative prices of shrimp at retail were not reflecting what's happening at a wholesale level. So the shrimp sales have been underwater for the last 2 years. And the inflationary price increases, especially at retail level, were not pushing or promoting demand. If you look at consumer prices for shrimp in supermarkets, they have recently started easing, but there's also more retail promotion that's happening, and the expectation is that this might boost consumption again. However, even if you're reducing the nominal prices of shrimp relative to other animal proteins, it still doesn't look as cheap. So it depends on who you're competing with, right? So one of the things we've heard is that retailers are, they're having to manage a lot of inventory items, and shrimp profits in a way were able to offset a lot of the other commodities. And many retailers, despite having having a shrimp, they were at cheap prices. They were selling it still at higher prices at retail level to maintain some sort of profit margins. And this, in a sense, started putting some sort of a strain on producers, because there was a huge difference between import demand and retail demand. Now, from the beginning of the year until now, the good news is that retailers are starting to reduce their prices slightly, and therefore the market might be recovering. But the question is, how long is this going to be sustained? And this is something we show regarding the US market and demand. You look for a long time, you'll see the periods that are highlighted in gray. There's substantial continuous decline. It's been declining continuously, but it seems that towards this Q3, Q4, we started seeing some sort of pivot, some signal that things are changing. And the first half of the year, the economy was expected to contract. The high interest rates, lower consumer savings, and there is more optimism. However, there is more optimism now that consumers will see some sort of relief from inflation, and this might push recovery and might put a halt to the declining prices in the second half of the year. Recent data also suggests that disinflation in retail is outpacing food service, and a lot of these cash constrained consumers are shifting to more value channels and at-home consumption. So our belief is that the retail demand will come back, and if retailers do start reducing shrimp prices, this might boost demand and might eventually help prices pick up, maybe end of the year, maybe this early next year. Now, we will look at EU as well. EU is pretty straightforward. EU is even though it had a substantial decline, it somehow follows US behavior, but there's a lag to it, right? But they are relatively more stable compared to US and even China. They don't experience the same level of volatility. Prices are declining at retail level, but similar to the US, the retail prices are not reflecting wholesale price declines. Also, in Europe, there's more of a diversified mix, so you're less reliant on a single product. Another thing we're seeing is that Ecuador is starting to gain much higher market share in this market. Now, even though we do expect the Europe to recover, it won't be like a substantial recovery. And we believe the two US and China are going to play a much larger role. Now, before I get into the trade data on China, I want to highlight some key macro dynamics in China. Recently, there was a property crisis that has led to lower consumer sentiment. Disposable income growth in China is slowing down. There's additional pressure from the property crisis sector that has triggered recessionary behavior. We don't have the data here now because the time series was discontinued. But the last time we checked, the savings rate were at the highest they've been in a decade. And consumers are looking to pay for money. And if you look at the Chinese market, while the West went one way, China went the other way. Despite lowering lower consumer sentiment, they kept buying and importing more. As I said earlier, the second half of 2022 and the first half of 2023, in total eclipsed 1 million tons in imports. And at they were able to absorb this production boost coming out of Ecuador. Now, the key concern is that what we saw in US in 2022 or in 2023 might also happen in China, maybe not to the same magnitude. We are seeing that there's an imbalance that's been happening in China as well that has put downward pressure on prices. And also, when you look at China, they've also been expanding their domestic production. And if you look at inventory levels in China, they peaked at around 8,000 containers in December last year in 2023, and decreased to roughly like 6,000 in January. And these inventory changes are very essential because they might serve as a reference for this year's market trends. Now we have to see what will happen in terms of reducing. But China is the most difficult one to predict. Now we'll get into the producers a little bit. There are different farming methods. Asians, Ecuadorians, they farm differently, and I think a lot of people here are probably aware of what's happening. Ecuador, has a higher level of technological implementation, which has allowed them to intensify. Asians, they have faced recent problems in pushing environmental capacity. They don't have the same level of aeration systems or automatic feeders in grow-out ponds, which can allow higher stocking densities and lower the mortalities. But the key reason here is that the Asian farmers are very, very fragmented, and inputs are controlled by agents, in particular in India. So let's get into some of the key producers, what's happening. There's a great report by Hatch Blue. They talk about what are the main challenges and considerations for a lot of the producers. And what you'll see is that there's some sort of symmetry of what's happening, or some sort of correlation between the Asians, but the Ecuadorians have more different problems. Now, diseases are the top challenge for producers in Asia. They struggle with managing pathogen levels. And pond environmental conditions are the second key concern. Managing water quality, chemical discharges, seed stock quality and availability is also one of the top concerns, because many farmers in Asia especially attribute mortalities to slow growth of poor seed and due to poor seed quality. Secondly, farmers invest a lot more time in creating algae blooms to create optimal nutrient conditions. So if there's any sort of delay in the post-larva delivery, it can lead to farmers stocking in nutrient deficient ponds. Access to capital remains a concern. So Asians, the key, if you look at it, to summarize it, it's biological costs. And it seems like they're approaching, they're pivoting more and focusing on how do we control these access costs, such as disease costs, environmental costs, and all these things, and prevent high mortality rates and failure rates. While Ecuadorians, on the other hand, are looking at more, aerators, oxygen, pumping, more infrastructure related, which can help them boost production. And in terms of what they need, as I said just now, Asians are looking at productivity and efficiency. They need better infrastructure, better control over pond space to avoid contamination. They need better technology to be able to intensify successfully at the rate they want to. In essence, they're trying to mitigate the biological costs. Ecuador, on the other hand, is focused more on cost efficiency. They want cheaper access to energy, but most importantly, the big players are looking to technify the rest of the Ecuadorian farms through acquisitions. It's estimated roughly less than 50% of the Ecuadorian farms are technified, meaning that they're doing, semi-intensive or maybe even intensive levels of production. But there are still a lot of smaller players who do extensive farming. So Ecuador, after a slow start, it seems like April and May, volume surged. April, it reached around 112,000 tons, which is a 19% increase compared to April last year, and this continued growing with May reaching around 125. Now, Ecuador initially, beginning of the year, people thought that Ecuador might decline in terms of production to create some sort of a rebalancing, but it's still on track for continued growth now, which is contrary to what we believed in the beginning of the year. But because there were some signs signaling some sort of sluggish demand in China, and it remains its most important partner. But they started increasing. So the question is, when China is softening, their imports are lowering, and Ecuador exports around 65-70% of the volume to China, what is still leading to an increase? Well, Ecuador is diversified. And when we look at the market share of exports, in 2023, year to date, so January to June, 64% of total Ecuadorian exports were sent to China, while US and EU had roughly a share of 16 to 14%. However, this share declined to 56% for China, and EU and US rose to 19 and 17%. But what's interesting is that these products are not necessarily all the same. China imports head-on, shell-on shrimp, unprocessed. So the weight that's exported tends to be higher. Now, if we take the exports that are happening to EU and US, because Ecuador has been investing more in processing, the live weight equivalent might be higher. So in a sense, maybe the share of US and EU is actually larger than we think. And Ecuador has been investing more in that. Now, this is we've adjusted this recently in terms of forecasting what their growth can be. We do expect it to slow down a little bit heading forward, but I think more farms are going to be technified, increase aeration. There's going to be improvement in growth rates, and in the long term, Ecuador is still going to be the most efficient in terms of growth. They're going to grow the most and fastest, maybe not to the extent of the rates we've seen over the last 5 years or so, but still good growth. India, on the other hand, also, it's coming through a tough time, but they performed better than we initially expected. Their export volumes, were down in May till May, and they lean heavily on the US. And they need to do a better job in finding alternative markets. But we have heard that their productivity has improved. A lot of farmers are focusing more on lowering the stocking densities and focusing on lowering mortality and mortality rates and failure rates, and focusing more on efficiency. And if you look at it, we think it only had a 2% decline in 2023, and we think they're going to be back to growth this year. Now, India is the third largest shrimp producer in the world. It has roughly 170,000 hectares engaged in shrimp farming, but it is very, very fragmented, where average farm is around 2 hectares, which is very, very small. And as I said earlier, they are reducing stocking densities, trying to incorporate more technology as well at farm levels. There are companies like Aqua Exchange, which are these startups that have gained funding to help farmers with that. The key risk, however, for them is that Ecuador is investing in simple processing, such as headless shell-on or headless shell-off shrimp and peel products, and they have been able to take a market share from India and the US. And some processors in India have already showed the intention to diversify and have invested in capacity for cooked shrimp, further value-added shrimp, such as tempura. So in a sense, India is now positioning itself to compete better with other Asian counterparts, such as Indonesia and Vietnam, if it will lose the simple peeled products market space to the Ecuadorians. So this is going to be a very interesting dynamic, and we have yet to see. But there is one key concern. There has been a lot of negative publicity around India. The recent accusations over labor rights issues have been very, very highlighted. But it's also very necessary to highlight that this sector is so important in providing direct and indirect employment to India, that there's over 1 million people, 1 to 1.5 million people employed in this sector alone in key regions like Andhra Pradesh, which contribute substantially to its economy. Vietnam, on the other hand, is the region that has been hit the most. They've had a lot of problems. They have to figure out. They need better regulation in terms of pond space. They have to figure out better control over diseases. There remain a lot of production issues, and this has caused high production costs. These are not limited to feed only. It's mostly biological costs, and they've also been affected by sluggish demand. And they are also facing more competition from like Ecuador and India. They do have a competitive edge in producing cooked and further value-added products, but with India starting to look into that, and maybe even Ecuador to some extent down the line, this is a huge risk for Vietnam. And I am more bullish about India and Ecuador's prospects than Vietnam's prospects. Indonesia, on the other hand, despite signs of improving demand in the US, it's heavily reliant on the American market. But as I said earlier, they have lost market share not to India but to Ecuador as well. And if this intense competition keeps going on, and this will add pressure on the Indonesian market, and maybe producers need to start diversifying and reduce their reliance on a single market like America. Shrimp as a product has many potential markets, and there has not been much innovation in terms of product form, in terms of retail, especially in Europe as well. If you go to a store, you'll see so many varieties of salmon, but you won't see many varieties of shrimp. So if Indonesia wants to tap into or gain or diversify in US or even in EU, they need to adapt to different product forms, which will maybe put them into a separate category instead of competing with. Now, from a global standpoint, we expect production to be in the single digits. But as I said, the growth can also be accelerated. We think it might reach 7 million tons by 2030. And but with better technology, increased efficiency, more consolidation, I think there will be improvement in output. There's going to be more profitability, and also when more product forms start entering the market, that will boost demand. There's a huge market in India as well. India can, if India pushes more on building up its domestic demand, which we are seeing now, and I think India's domestic demand is a lot higher than what people tend to believe, then India has no reason to, no reason not to accelerate growth. So there are a lot of demand growth pockets available. And this is something that I believe in the long term will continue supporting the shrimp industry. In the short term, biosecurity, environment, and better, professionalism and husbandry skills are important for the shrimp sector. All this will play a huge role, but I want to end on a very positive note. The shrimp sector has high income elasticity of demand. There's a rising middle class aging population that's focusing on healthy diets, and I sometimes feel the messaging of the nutritional benefits of shrimp have not been relayed or broadcasted as well as the salmon industry has. There's still a lot of learnings to do. There's still a lot of technology that the sector can incorporate. They don't have religious constraints. There is more of a retail penetration that's happening in a lot of markets. And most importantly, it has a low FCR, it has a low greenhouse gas emissions. And this can really play a role in a lot of the diets for a lot of people, but there has to be some sort of a combined effort to promote demand, so almost to the level of what the Norwegians did when it came to salmon. And I think this can happen, but it will take time. And for an industry so young, it's outperformed in my belief. So to end it, 2024, I think prices are going to gradually improve towards the second half of the year. And a lot depends on Chinese demand as well and the speed of US demand. But we are seeing signs that US demand is recovering. And we have to see what inventory levels will be in China. But there is, some sort of optimism for 2025. And we haven't, if you guys want, I can talk to the organizers of the event, but we have a forecast that we release at the end of the month for the next year. And we interview a lot of, the main industry experts for that. So if anyone here is interested in that, I can also send it to you. You'll have my email here and my phone number as well. And I'm always more than happy to answer any questions. So from my end, this is it. Thank you everyone for listening in. I hope I could share. I hope you found my opinions, insightful. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sharma, for very insightful presentation. Now, for everyone in the audience, we already checked our chat box. We got a few questions. The first question is actually, do you think the pricing of shrimp will continuously increase in Q4 this year in Asia? I think especially Malaysia, Indonesia, China, and Vietnam. What is your view on the pricing in Q4? Mr. Sharma?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. See, shrimp pricing has been one of the hardest things to predict in a long, long time. But in terms of what we expect, I do expect it to rise marginally. But if people are expecting a substantial, price bump, I don't think that's going to happen. What I truly think that the prices we saw maybe in 2021 were more of an anomaly. Uh, but I think they will improve, but not to the level of what we used to see like 2.5 years ago. But instead, it's probably going to form like a new benchmark of prices moving forward. So, in short, it'll improve marginally.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sharma. Sorry, I need to remind the local team, our local representative, to help to translate the question and answer, make sure all our customer understand. The second questions I want to take is, what do you think the Asian producer, shrimp producer, has to change to against the very low price of Ecuadorian shrimp dumped to Asia? What do you think? What needs to be changed?
That's a that's a very good question, because if you look at it the last few years, how the Ecuadorian industry is compared to the Asian industry is very, very different in terms of the structure and everything. And for some time, because of how fragmented sometimes the Asian shrimp sector is, how it can be small, people tend to be very price focused. But instead, to ensure profitability, a better approach, I believe, is cost reduction in terms of efficiency. If you look at the Ecuadorians, if it's the big players who are actually, still doing all right, and they're doing all right because they figured out a way to reduce costs and be as efficient as possible. Another thing is the biological costs. They're so high in Asia. That needs to change. And ideally, you'd want a better ecosystem, so governments to come in, local banks to come in, just to create more of a healthier ecosystem where farmers are more likely to just improve on their efficiency and productivity. Because unless that happens, it's the price is still out of their control. And if Ecuador keeps rising the way it does and starts diversifying its end markets, Asian product will be in direct competition with them, and it's going to be hard. So I think it's best to maybe, instead of just constantly intensifying, focus more on efficiency, cleaner ponds, less diseases. But this is just one of the things. There's a lot that can happen.
Okay, thanks. I want to take the last questions actually from Vietnam. The lesson learned from Ecuador after the big hits of the white spot, they focus on genetic improvements, feed improvements, automatic feeder, and have big success over there. So should Vietnamese farmers follow Ecuadorian strategies as well?
I think one of the key, yes, genetics played a good role in helping Ecuador achieve what they did. But one of the things that's missed out is Ecuador was not really intensive for a long time. They just started becoming more intensive gradually, but how they started intensifying was a lot more systematic, and it's done by the larger players. So they started using auto feeders, aerators, everything. So their intensification was more was better in that sense. I don't know if Vietnam can do it. Maybe they can. You need a lot of funding, first of all. You need the right expertise of people coming in and helping you out. You can't just intensify like the Ecuadorians without planning. I think there needs to be a certain level of planning involved. I think the feed players can help tremendously in this regard as well, in terms of helping not only like the medium sized players as well, by giving them the inputs, just so they can become more efficient. I know some feed players already do that, where they collaborate with automatic feeder providers and aerators, and in a sense just enhance the predictability of the farm. But I don't know. Vietnam has not been performing as well as we thought, but I think the bigger problem for Vietnam is more the regulatory control and the water quality and stuff like that.
All right. Thanks, Sharma. Okay, again, thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. Now let's move to our next topics. It's a very interesting topic, so a bit more technical. It's the overview of the common shrimp diseases, prevention, and the PO selections. And to explore these topics, we are excited to welcome the Dr. Loc Tran. And he is the shrimp pathologist. And he's also the university lecturer and a founder of the Shrimp Vet, a research company in Vietnam. He also has his own hatchery and farm. So let's welcome Dr. Loc Tran and his presentations.
Hello, everyone. This is Loc Tran, and it's an honor and pleasure for me to participate in the meeting of Wok Kok farmers. So the topic for today is the holistic approaches in disease management, with a lot of lessons learned in Vietnam in shrimp disease management. So basically, as you know, shrimp disease is the most important issue in Asia, and we have been facing many diseases in recent years. So you may see in this small picture showing various shrimp with different pathogens and diseases. Starting from the left, you may see SPF shrimp, indicating specific pathogen-free or healthy shrimp. Moving to the right, you may see EHP infected shrimp, which is one of the most significant disease in Asia. And you may see EMS affected shrimp. This disease happened in early 2010 and still a very significant disease. And you may see white physis infected shrimp. And this is also a very significant disease in Asia. And move on, we have a viral infected shrimp named white spot syndrome virus. And then muscle necrosis caused by a bacteria. And then IMNV, which is a viral disease still happening in some Asian countries, including, I think, Indonesia, some part of Malaysia, and some part of India. And very recently, we got a new disease named translucent post-larva disease, or TPD, affecting shrimp at post-larva stage and also at young juveniles. So there will be a lot of disease to cover for today. Starting with the first disease named EMS, or acute hepatopancreatic necrosis disease, happened This disease was first recorded in Asia in early 2009, 2010, and affecting many countries in Southeast Asia, and then spread to some part of the Americas. And as you may see that we have two shrimp over here. The one in the right showing a normal looking shrimp, starting from the stomach with some food, and the dark, big hepatopancreas, and then a full midgut. In contrast, the infected shrimp showing an empty stomach, an atrophy and whitish hepatopancreas, and an empty midgut. And these are the typical cross sign of this disease. And the disease is caused by the bacterium that carry a pair of toxin gene named here AB. And the toxin is the causation of all the damage. And we move to white physis disease. So white physis is a quite significant problem in intensive farming in Asia. And there's a lot of controversy behind the real causation of white physis. But I will tell you a few phenomena associated with white physis disease. So typically the disease happens in shrimp of 30-day plus of culture. And usually it happens in shrimp pond with a lot of nutrient, or we call it eutrophication, some algal plume and crust event. And typically those shrimp ponds are not very well managed in terms of feeding. So those events may point to one hypothesis that the bacteria seems to be the most appropriate pathogen to cause the syndrome. So at our laboratory, we have isolated some bacteria from white physis infected shrimp, and then we challenged the healthy shrimp with those bacteria. And as you may see over here, that the experimentally infected shrimp with the bacteria show some very typical signs of white physis. And we also see a very interesting phenomenon that shrimp pond that were confirmed with EHP seems to be very prone to white physis. So what happened is that EHP caused a lot of damage to the hepatopancreas. And EHP, after causing the damage to the hepatopancreas, it creates a condition for any opportunistic bacteria to further destroy the hepatopancreas. And the white fecal matter is the result of the damage of the hepatopancreas. So that is why we see a kind of a combination of white physis and EHP in different scenarios. So scenario number one, we have the white physis disease caused by bacteria alone, no EHP. And in this case, it usually due to poor management. And in this case, we can fix it by reduced feeding, by doing some water exchange, by reducing shrimp stress, and shrimp can recover. And we also see a scenario of white physis disease associated with EHP. And in this case, we call it non-recoverable because the white physis is the consequences of the very bad damage caused by EHP. And we all understand that EHP is by far not treatable at the time being. So I already mentioned EHP. So what is EHP? So EHP is a disease caused by a parasite with a scientific name, Enterocytozoon hepatopenii. This parasite is the intracellular parasite, meaning that it attacks the shrimp hepatopancreas cells from inside and destroy the hepatopancreas cells. And that is why when shrimp get infected with this parasite, the growth rate reduced significantly, and that caused a lot of economic losses in farming. So that is why we realized that the stock must be clean of those diseases. And we started to investigate whether the host larva can carry those pathogens to the shrimp pond. And we did a small investigation collecting samples from many hatcheries and many host larva samples because we have some diagnostic laboratory in Vietnam. And after analyzing hundreds of thousands of samples, we concluded something quite interesting. That we found a quite significant prevalence of EMS in host larva. And you may see that in 2018, it got about 10%. 2019, it jumped to 27%. And similarly to EHP, we also see an increase of the percentage. And where is the source of infection? We come back to the hatchery and we check for the broodstock feces. We check for the feed that we fed to the broodstock, and we found something interesting. So after a bit of time in the maturation, the broodstock become contaminated with EMS and EHP. And where those pathogens coming from? And we found out that the live feed have some percentage of contamination with either EMS or EHP or both. So bloodworm, oyster, and squid, if not treated, is very dangerous because it can transfer the pathogen to the broodstock, and then the broodstock will transfer that pathogen to the PL, and then we stock the PL to the pond, and then we see the consequences in the grow out. So that is why prevention for those diseases is the key for the success of shrimp farming nowadays. And I want to share with you that I'm also running a company that we also producing post larva, and also commercially we farm shrimp at a very large scale. And we understand that if we cannot manage the quality of our post larva, we kill our business. And that is the reason why we build a comprehensive risk management program in order to manage the quality of our post larva, with focus on EHP and bacterial disease elimination from the post larva. So in the hatchery, in order to prevent EHP, we developed a checkpoint that we will monitor in a very frequently. So we check for the broodstock feces, broodstock feed, nuclei, and post larva. In terms of disinfection, we did some research and we concluded that a few chemical over here is effective against the EHP, and that includes sodium hydroxide, bleach, potassium permanganate, and formalin. And in terms of treating the fresh feed, freezing appears to be the most effective method in order to inactivate EHP spores. So we can do that with oyster and squid very effectively and successfully. For the bloodworm or polychaetes, this is quite complex. This is quite complicated because when you operate hatchery, you need to make sure that the broodstock can mature and spawn, and that is why you need to supply them with a lot of nutrient coming from the polychaetes. And when you freeze it, and sometimes if you don't have a good freezing method, and then you thaw the polychaetes, all the fluid inside the polychaetes just leach out and no nutrient left for the broodstock to feed. And that is why we have two alternatives. So the first alternative is to have the SPF polychaetes. And nowadays in the market, you may find that there are some commercial company producing SPF certified polychaetes. And in the best case scenario, if you can purchase it for your broodstock, that would be the best scenario. In case that you have no access to the SPF polychaetes, we can have a compromise for you that you can do the water flow through for the polychaetes for several hours in clean water. The reason is the contamination of EHP is from the food that the polychaetes are ingesting. And if we do the water flow through several hours, the polychaetes may defecate everything, and that make the gut clean, and the contamination is significantly reduced. So that is very much about how to treat the fresh feed. I really focus on this. And we have another checkpoint that when we obtain the nuclei in the spawning and hatching tank, as you know, when we do the spawning, the eggs, the fertilized eggs themselves do not contain EHP. But the fecal matter of the females when they are spawning may potentially have the EHP. And that is why at this time, EHP is there and may attach on the eggs or the nuclei. And that is why we can do the nuclei wash. We can harvest the nuclei too, and then do the formalin dipping, 200 ppm in 30 seconds. And this appears to be quite effective. And then in the best case scenario, you may have a system of nuclei wash with water flow through for several hours for the nuclei to metamorphosis to nuclei, the nuclei will metamorphosis from nuclei 2 to nuclei 5. And during this stage, a lot of EHP might be washed off already. And then you will collect the nuclei 5, and then you may repeat the formalin wash protocol again. And after those 3 steps, the nuclei appears to be very clean. At the farm level, we also have some checkpoint, and that includes the post larva that we import from the hatchery and the pond bottom. And those might need to be checked very carefully. And in terms of biosecurity measures and disinfection, the water disinfection is very important because in reality, we may have different shrimp ponds sharing the same water input, maybe the same river or the same water creek. And that is why the discharge from one pond may transfer the pathogen to other farms. And that is why we need to have a proper water treatment. So if we don't have a proper water treatment, there is no hope to manage EHP. So typically, for the water treatment, we must have water sedimentation ponds that we can precipitate a lot of organic matter. And for me, this is one of the most crucial steps. We can also enhance the sedimentation by adding a few chemicals. For example, you can use quicklime or calcium oxide or potassium permanganate. And then after the precipitation, the water become clean. And then we can use different chemical for treatment. And the water must be stored prior to use. In terms of facility and ponds disinfection, as I mentioned before, we have a few chemical over here, appears to be quite effective. In terms of soil treatment, calcium oxide is very helpful. And in case that the pond tests positive to EHP, we should use calcium oxide at the rate of at least 600 kilograms per 1,000 square meter. And sludge removal is also very important in case we have dirt pond for cultivation. So removing the sludge after each crop is very important. And no matter if we have EHP or we don't, we still have to treat the pond carefully and have a proper crop holidays. And during the cultivation, we should check for the growth rate very carefully. And there's an indicator named average daily growth. So if the ADG is below 0.15 after the stream reach 2 grams, it's an indicator that there might be something wrong with the shrimp ponds. And we should check if the shrimp is positive to EHP. In early stage, I think it's better that we should harvest. And if the shrimp is a little bit bigger already, we should further monitor to see if the shrimp can still grow to any harvestable size. And we also need to put a lot of precaution in preventing bacterial diseases like viruses and stress, because those are the triggering factors that further exacerbate the condition of EHP. I want to mention another disease named translucent host larva disease. And this disease just popped out a few years ago, first reported in China and then spread to some country in Southeast Asia. So typically it damaged the production in the hatchery, and we also see some problem at the nursery as well, and causing a lot of mortality during the stocking in the nursery. So as you see over here, we have shrimp at stocking, at the post-larva stage, the healthy one in the left and the affected one in the right. And the affected shrimp will show empty hepatopancreas and the whitest of the hepatopancreas. And I want to show you the lesion, the pathology caused by TPD. And as you see, in the hepatopancreas, there's a lot of necrosis. And in the terminal phase, there's a lot of cell sloughing in the hepatopancreas, showing a very bad damage to the hepatopancreas and also the infiltration of hemocells. And those damage cause the mortality very quickly to the host larva. So this disease is pretty serious. I want to show you the mortality in the challenge study. And this is very fascinating that this pathogen can kill the shrimp at very low density. Starting at 10 to the power 2, it starts killing the shrimp. And in the juveniles, it can also kill the juvenile at way lower than the density of EMS killing the shrimp, meaning that TBD is very toxic, very pathogenic. Another disease named muscle necrosis, and this disease caused by Vibrio harvii, especially happening in intensive ponds. And as you see over here, the shrimp show some whitish in the tail muscle. And Vibrio harvii was isolated from the necrotic muscle. And at our laboratory, we already completed the challenge study showing that this bacteria is the real pathogen causing the muscle necrosis and mortality in intensive ponds. And under the histology, you may see that the bacteria is really destroying the tissue fiber. And for prevention of this disease, we usually see the disease in ponds with high density of algae and high stocking density and low pool water quality, like low dissolved oxygen, low alkalinity, and high in nitrite. Sorry for the typo. So what we do is that we do the opposite. We need to control the algal density. We need to stock the shrimp with appropriate stocking density, maintaining high DO, high alkalinity, and low in nitrite, and improving the shrimp health in general. Okay, so I already mentioned a couple important diseases in shrimp farming. So how can we select for the good post larva is super important. So I will show you some principle for seed selection. For us, PCR method is the most important methodology for seed selection. And we must make sure that the shrimp is clean of important viral disease like white spot and IMNV in Asia, especially in Asia. For parasitic disease, EHP is the most significant one. And for bacterial disease, we have the methods to detect EMS and TBD already. So those pathogens are not supposed to be detected in the post larva, implying that if we have any batch of post larva that's positive to any of those diseases, we should not use them for stocking. However, in reality, we may not have access to the PCR service because PCR require a lot of investment and a lot of training. So that is why it's typically not available in general. So what can we do? We can have other more practical methods to check for the post-larva. So I will show you a few indicators over here. First is the uniformity. So in the uniformity means we check for the uniform in size of the post-larva in terms of length. And we have a parameters named coefficient of variance. And the CV must be below 12%. So it is above 12%, indicating that this batch of shrimp is highly vary in size, and indicating that the batch of shrimp is not very good. And we can use microscope to check for any signs of fouling, any signs of necrosis in the appendages, any melanization, any atrophy hepatopancreas, any tubules necrosis in the hepatopancreas, or the absence of hepatopancreas lipids. So those signs are not supposed to be detected in a healthy batch of post-larva. We also have another indicator named muscle to gut ratio. And ideally, we should have the ratio of 4:1. And we also can use some very simple methods to check for the post-larva, like the activeness. For example, we can scoop a spoon of post-larva in a small container with some water, and then we may swirl the water in order to create a current to see if the shrimp can swim against the water current and not getting accumulated in the center, and no dead shrimp in the center. We can use some very simple stress tests, for example, like formalin and salinity stress test. So for the formalin stress test, we need to prepare a solution of formalin, 200 ppm, and then put about 100 shrimp in there and check for the survivability after 30 minutes. So, and for the salinity test, we just transfer the shrimp to fresh water. And after 30 minutes, we check for the survivability. So in a good performing batch of post-larva, the survivability must be above 90%. In terms of bacterial count, this can be applied very simple methods to check for the density and also the ratio of the green forming colonies versus the yellow forming colonies on TCBS agar. I would say that this could be applied, and it should give us some idea about the quality of the batch of post-larva. However, sometimes it is quite ambiguous to interpret the data. Sometimes we have very high density of Vibrio, but the shrimp is still performing well. Sometimes we have low density of Vibrio, but the batch is not very healthy. So it is a little bit difficult to interpret. But if you see something really abnormal, for example, like a very big dominance of green colonies, Vibrio, on TCBS, that may give you some indicator that that batch of shrimp may have some problem. So in order to put all of those methodology or intervention I already mentioned into a comprehensive risk management program, we create a very quite simple risk management for disease control. For example, over here, we developed this for EHP, and then you can use the same idea to manage other diseases. I will give you one example. When we manage a big farm, we may find out that sometimes one pond pop out with one disease, even though the same batch of post-larva stock into other ponds not showing any disease, and vice versa. So sometimes it's very difficult to make a conclusion where the disease is from. So I call an incident that a disease pop out from one pond is like a probability. And for example, I mentioned before that in production ponds, especially in earthen ponds, the percentage of EHP is pretty high. Sometimes it's up to 50–60% during the rainy season. And where the disease from? We have a hypothesis that, okay, it comes from the PL, the post-larva. So it's from the vertical transmission. Or it can also come from the contaminated farm before. And because this is horizontal transmission. And in the vertical transmission, we have the flow, the flow of production, starting from the broodstock, and then the broodstock is fed with the broodstock feed, and then we produce the nuclei, we produce the PL from the nuclei, and then we stock with that PL. And also at the farm, we may also have the nursery. So we have some control points over here. And we can intervene. For example, in the broodstock, we can do the testing and elimination. For example, if the batch of broodstock is contaminated, we may just dispose it and use the new one. Or in the feed, we can do the freezing. In the nuclei, we can do the nuclei wash. In the post-larva, we can do the testing and elimination, etc. Blah, blah, blah. And then, if we apply those interventions, we can significantly reduce the chance that the pathogen can transfer from one step to the others. So if we do a series of intervention, eventually the probability is significantly reduced because it will be multiplied by a lot of probability reduction factors. And as you see in the vertical transmission, we can do a lot. In the horizontal transmission, we can do a lot as well, like water treatment, pond cleaning, health booster for the shrimp, stress reduction, monitoring program, etc. And eventually we can reduce, we can drive the risk from like 60% down to very low, like 1% in an ideal scenario. Okay, so that is very much what we have learned about EHP management. And in case of bacterial management, bacterial disease management, I want to tell you an interesting story. Back to early 2010s in Asia, especially in Vietnam, when we did not understand what was the causation of EMS. When we stock the PL into the ponds, usually the disease happened in 20 to 30 days of cultivation, and we didn't know what caused the mortality. We just chlorinate the pond and then stock a new batch again because we apply the same methods that we eradicate white spot syndrome virus. But what happened later is that the mortality in the second stocking may happen earlier, for example, at day 15. And we repeat it again, and the mortality this time happened even earlier, like day 10. So we have a hypothesis that, hey, there could be something growing fast in the newly disinfected water. And we suspect it could be bacteria. We don't know what bacteria is there. So we come up with a method that we may maturate the water. We make the water mature with some other non-shrimp species. We grow fish to make the water rich in some other slow-growing bacteria, etc. And then we use that water to stock the shrimp. And it was successful. Very interesting. So we have learned that the heavy disinfection of water may not help control vibriosis later in the cultivation, because Vibrio can proliferate very quickly. So that is why I would say that I don't underestimate the water treatment, but what I mean is that water treatment alone is not enough. So after the water being treated, we should mature it. We should make it mature with some beneficial bacteria. For example, can use polyculture, or we can use probiotics. And that know-how has been adopted in Vietnam, and that led to the successful recovery from EMS. And I already mentioned that Vibrio may proliferate very quickly. So we did a fun study in the hatchery and see this phenomenon. So when we prepare the water for stocking the nuclei, the water is clean because the water is properly disinfected, no bacteria at all. But after we stock with the nuclei, a few days later, maybe 1 or 2 days later, the Vibrio really increased in number, going up to 10 to the power of 5, 10 to the power of 6 per milliliter. And at that density, the bacteria can kill the larvae already, especially at the Zoea 2-3. And later, after maybe 5, 6, 7 days, the Vibrio density appears to reduce. Why is that? Probably due to some competition of other groups of bacteria. And in the PL stage, the Vibrio density increased again. And this is due to the nutrient availability from the feed that we have to increase in feeding to the larval tank during this stage. So I don't want to see the Vibrio going to 10 to the power 5, because at that density, it starts to affect the shrimp health. So instead of having a very big wave of Vibrio, we want to have some other non-Vibrio bacteria to take over that environment. And that is why we introduced probiotics in the water prior to stocking with PL or nuclei. And what we found was quite interesting. So if we can maintain a healthy density of probiotics, the Vibrio appears to be more well-behaved. So you may see that the Vibrio may not be the most dominant, but instead the probiotics become more dominant and make the Vibrio more inferior. And in this case, the disease may not happen. And I want to show you a bad versus a good pond in cultivation. So in the shrimp pond, if we do nothing, just get the water in and then stock and then feed, eventually you may find a lot of algal bloom. And the algal bloom will lead to pH fluctuation, will lead to DO fluctuation, will lead to the depletion of alkalinity, etc. And eventually nitrite may increase very quickly. And those conditions allow white physis disease to appear. And in contrast, so if we manage the pond well, like keeping the pH and DO stable at the ideal range, that may help keeping the alkalinity stable as well. And nitrite may not increase that quick. And algal crash and whitefish events are less likely to happen. I want to show you just a few fun studies that we did in our research. For example, we used photosynthetic bacteria cultivated in a laboratory and introduced that bacteria to the post-larva cultivation. And then we challenged the shrimp with the pathogen, and shrimp don't die at all. Meaning that if we can maintain a good population, good density of probiotics or healthy bacteria or beneficial bacteria from the beginning, it may help control the disease. Okay, so in case we do everything right, but the disease is still happening, what should we do? For bacterial disease like EMS or any other bacterial disease, the rule number one is that we need to reduce feeding immediately, because the feed is the nutrient feeding to the bacteria and make them more pathogenic, more stronger. We may need to do some water exchange, siphoning, in order to keep the water clean, but don't do things so dramatically, because any strong movement may further make the shrimp stress, like they may molt if we exchange too much water, etc. We need to reduce the density of algae by using probiotics, like at nighttime. Using algaecide is not recommended, because if we create an algal crash, it will be the end of the crop. And after we do everything and the mortality may stop, we may resume feeding, but bear in mind that do this very carefully. Just feed the shrimp back like 20%, 30%, 40%. But in this time, we need to use the feed as the carrier of probiotic or immunostimulation in order to improve the shrimp health, so they can make it through this bad event. And we can use probiotic, immunostimulant, or some prophylaxis like organic acids, monoglyceride, yeast, etc., and coat on the feed prior to feeding. And I want to tell you that in our laboratory, we have tested several products like prophylactics, immunostimulants, and lab study demonstrated many of them show very good effects against bacterial disease, including a lot of generic name over here. You may see organic acid, monoglyceride, fermented ingredients, insect meal, etc. And the know-how from those research allow the feed mill to formulate the functional feed with focus on improving the growth performance and survivability. And I want to summarize some facts, fun facts about probiotic versus Vibrio. So I just want to make a fun cartoon characterizing the three groups of bacteria we may have in the environment. The bad is the obligate pathogen. The good is the introduced probiotics. The ugly is the opportunistic bacteria. Usually they are normal bacteria, but in case the shrimp gets stressed, they will be damaged by this group of bacteria. And the bad and the ugly proliferate very quickly. And the probiotic, they are new to the environment. They cannot replicate that fast. So that is why what we need to do is that we have to cheat this rate. So we need to introduce the probiotic in the water prior to stocking and maintain the dominance of this group of benefits of bacteria. And if we can maintain a good ratio of 100-1 of the good versus the bad, typically, in this case, the disease will not happen in those shrimp. So I want to conclude my presentation by some technical messages that the disease is the consequences of stress and other microbiological upset in the system. And the stress and other microbiological upset make the shrimp more susceptible to the diseases. I don't want to underestimate the pathogen, but we have to be realistic that sometimes we cannot manage 100% and make sure that all the ponds are clean. To some extent, we will still have some pathogen at different levels, especially the bacterial disease is very ubiquitous, it's always there. But it's just a matter that we can manage the microbiota or the microbiological population in the water and the stress factor. So that is why we need to focus on three things. First is strengthening the biosecurity. Make sure that some deadly pathogen will not have a chance to go to our farming system, including the viral pathogen and EHP, parasitic pathogen. Improving the shrimp health through better practice is very important, and also reduce any environmental and biological stress are the three key for disease control. And everything I just mentioned is a holistic approach in disease control. And I want to emphasize that disease management should be considered as a discipline that we build throughout our production process, and make sure that we put every good protocol in place and we have the discipline to execute the plan, and that will help substantially reduce the risk of disease. So that's very much for my presentation. I want to thank Wok Kok again for giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys today. I wish you guys all the success, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Loc. Thank you very much for your very insightful information and very practical solutions you provide to the audience. And now we learned disease is actually manageable. We just need to really taking care of the detail. I want to take a few questions. Already got one question from Vietnam. Okay, the first question is, if we run the PCR tests for finding EHP and the result is positive, what do we do by next? Dr. Loc.
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. So
Yep.
I think we may have two scenarios here. First is we get the PCR result from the post larva that we test from the hatchery. In that case, I would recommend that we should not stock that batch of PL into the ponds. In the scenarios that we already stocked the PL to the ponds and we got the PCR test positive, I think in this case, we need to check the situation. So if the shrimp is still growing fine, what I mean is that, let's say after the shrimp get to 30 days and they are growing something like 0.2 or above grams a day, you can still be able to manage to grow them to harvestable size. So in that case, we can grow them to probably 8-10 grams, and if the growth decline, you can harvest and make some money back. But if the growth is below that number, for example, like per week, they're growing less than 1.5 gram, I think that would be better that we harvest to reduce the losses.
Okay, thank Dr. Loc. The second question is actually from Indonesia. Very straightforward questions. And how to prevent EHP and white faces diseases? Please explain shortly. Yep.
Sure. So it is very strong correlation of white faces with EHP, as I mentioned in the presentation. So first of all, we got to make sure that the PL we stock to the pond are EHP free. And secondly, during the cultivation, we need to make sure that we manage the feeding well and environment well, because bacteria will be the secondary pathogen to cause the white faces. So we need to manage both EHP and bacteria to prevent white faces.
Okay. Because of time limits, I want to take the last questions from Malaysia. For white spot diseases, how to carry out from the prompt recovery?
Say it again, please.
Okay, the white spot diseases. How to carry out the prompt recovery, the quick recovery?
Quick recovery for after the pond get infected.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if I understand your question well, so you mean that after the outbreak of white spot, and then you harvest the pond already, and now it's time to disinfect the pond, right?
I mean, how to treat it quickly if the shrimp got white spot already?
Basically, there's no treatment for white spot to save them.
Okay.
But instead, when white spot is detected, I think the best way is to do emergency harvest and make sure that we properly clean the pond prior to the next crop.
I see. Okay, thanks, Dr. Loc. We still have some questions, but due to the time limits, we will still answer it later on. We will collect those questions sent to you. Then we will feed back to all the audience. So you will still see the answers from Dr. Loc. Thank you very much, Dr. Loc. Thanks for your participation.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Okay, let's move to the last topics. It's more relevant to our products, our feeds. The topic is the role of the shrimp feed and the feeding management during the disease threats. So we are delighted to have Dr. Wee. He's from Wee Aqua Consultancy in Australia, and he holds his PhD for fish nutrition from University of Stirling. And he has a lot of the experiences in shrimp feeds and the feeding management. He's also our very good friend. He actually worked as a group aqua nutritionist with the Gokoi since the old time in the year 2000. So let's welcome our good friends, Dr. Wee. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Pimiko and Agriconnect for inviting me to talk on this very important topic of shrimp feeds and feeding management during disease threats. In this short presentation, I will be talking about the importance of feeds and proper feeding program in maintaining pond quality and improve productivity. As we all know, over the last decade or so, shrimp diseases in intensive shrimp farming has become the most important factor in deciding whether the industry is sustainable and whether the farms actually have their profitability intact. So what I would like to give in this particular presentation is to talk about what type of feeds to be used and how we can get the feeds to the shrimp once we have decided on the feed. Why are feeds and feeding important? There are 4 factors that I have identified, and this list is not exhaustive. So maybe other viewers, when they listen to this talk, may say, look, some other things have been left out. Yes, I accept that. But this is, in my view, the most 4 important things that I look at when I'm considering feeds and feeding in shrimp farming. Number 1, of course, is farm production cost, the supply of nutrients to the animals, what other uses can be used for the feed. And the 4th one, which is the most important one, which I will spend a bit more time on, is actually on the source, the feed being a potential source of pollution. Now, production cost, as we know, that feed costs can be one of the highest variable costs in the farming operations. It has been estimated that up to 60 to 70% of an intensive shrimp farming production cost can be feed cost. So therefore, any action or any operational procedure that can reduce the feed cost will obviously have an impact on profitability. Now, either we cut down the use of feeds or cutting down on the negative impacts of feeds, which then improves the farming environment and so on, which would then results in higher productivity. Now, either way, we can improve on the farm production cost and profitability. Now, as I said before, it is important that we select the proper feeds for the shrimp farming, obviously, because we want animals to have the nutrients for optimal growth. It is different from an extensive farming where the animals can still get some nutrients from natural productivity in the pond. What I'm talking about here is actually for intensive shrimp farming. The only supply of nutrients that from the animals in the pond is actually from the feeds that we give them. So therefore, we must have a feed which is nutritionally complete, and not just nutritionally complete from a chemical analysis point of view, but is actually biologically available to the animal. This consists of micro and minor minerals, which I'll show you in my next slide. And the feed must also be highly palatable. It must be very attractive so that the animals get to the shrimp get to the feeds fast and consume it fast. There's no point having a good nutritionally complete feed if the animals cannot identify it, cannot find it, and is therefore not able to extract the nutrients from the feed. And the last one, of course, is the feed size must be appropriate for the different life stages. And it goes without saying that, smaller feeds for smaller size or young animals. And then as the animals grow, we change the feed to match its size. What do we mean by nutritionally complete profile? Is actually the animals must contain all the essential amino acid profile. We should not just look at quality protein and fat, but we must look into its essential components, such as essential amino acid. And the fat that we use, or the corn oil that we use, must contain the polyunsaturated fatty acids, for example, the EPA and the DHA, the phospholipids and the cholesterol, both of these which are important for the proper formation of molting hormones, membranes, and so on. So these are crucial. And also the other components such as minerals, vitamins, bioactive compounds, and antioxidants. And lastly, actually, it must also contain attractants and feeding stimulants. Why is the palatability important, or how fast the animals get to the feed is important? Because feeding shrimp, time is money. So if the animals are able to get to the shrimp fast, then we reduces the feed lost and the nutrient leaching, and the animals consume the feed fast. Now, with the reduction in feed losses and nutrients, we can actually result in good FCR. That means whatever feed that we give to the animal is now converted to flesh. And also, we do not pollute the water in the pond. Now, this is best illustrated or demonstrated in this study, which is shown here on the right-hand side of the screen. There are two feed A and B, blue and green lines. So normally, if we expose, in this particular example, if we expose the shrimp feed to water, within 1 hour, 5 to 10% of the dry matter is leached out. This equates to about a loss of 10 to 15% of formulation cost. If the exposure time is less, that means the animals get to the feed faster and do not allow feed to be exposed to shrimp water, pond water, you can see that only 4% of the dry matter is lost, right? 4% less dry matter is lost, and this then equates to only 6 to 7% formulation cost. So obviously, if the animals get to the shrimp faster and eat more, we then have less wastage of the feed in shrimp. So in this particular case, then you can see shrimp, the feed A is actually the one that is losing a lot more dry matter, and the feed B use less dry matter in the same amount of time. So feed B obviously is a better feed in this particular case. The other one, of course, is actually on the feed size. It's I think it's common sense and no need for me to actually extrapolate or talk too much about that, is that we need to select the feed size, which actually fits with the shrimp size as well. But equally important, of course, is that in the feed that we choose, is that what is the size distribution? The size distribution of the feed should actually match with the size that we select for that particular growth or life stages. So what we don't want to see, of course, is that we could select the, let's say this particular example which I'm going to show you on the graph on the right, is we selected a 2 millimeter diameter pellet. So we therefore want most of our feed to be 2.0 millimeter diameter. We don't want too many of the oversized, too big, or we don't want too many that's undersized, too small. So we want the majority of the feed to fall in that 2 millimeter diameter pellet. So in this case, then feed A is not the right feed to choose because a lot of the feeds actually is on the oversized. So therefore, B is a better feed in this particular case. Next. Okay, so I just mentioned about that, and also the importance of feed as a vehicle to actually supply functional ingredients and additives, because sometimes in the production cycle, there may be a need for us to introduce additives, whether it's to solve a particular problem or to improve on formulation and so on, is that, we can incorporate functional additives such as, for health purposes, we can include immunostimulants, or we can include prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, pathogenics, and so on into the feed, which then gets it to the animals. Otherwise, in a shrimp farming, it's impossible. It's not possible for us to actually treat a shrimp individually or to put them in a small enclosure and to feed them particularly. So we can use feed as a function vehicle to actually supply them. Or for example, if the animals at the end of the day, closer to the harvest cycle, we notice that animals are very pale and are lacking in certain pigments. So this is a time where we can actually introduce pigments into the feeds to allow for the animals to regain some of the coloration, which then improves on their market value. Now, this is the fourth point. This is the most important point for me, and I really want to spend a little bit more time on that one to talk about, if feeds are not used properly or are not supplied properly, are not presented to the shrimp properly, we can lead to poor pond quality in terms of water quality as well as pond bottom quality, subsequently causing shrimp stress. And as we all know, when animals are stressed, it creates other physiological problems, which I'll show you later. This is best illustrated or example shown in this particular graph. This is one particular example to put some numbers to quantify some of the what's happening to the feed when we feed it to animals. So it's not the standard, but it can be an example of what can happen when we give feeds to the animal. So in this particular case, if we take the feeds we give to the animal as 100%, we see that only 85% is actually consumed by the shrimp, 15% is leached, unconsumed. Of the 85% that is consumed, we can see that 48% is used in the regular metabolism of the animal. Some are lost to the uric acid and urea and so on. Some are lost during molting. Some are used, and majority used as a maintenance in the animal's living. Only 17% is harvested as mass, as the muscle or as tissues that we can use to market. Up to 20% can be lost as feces, as undigested food. Now, if we look at it in more greater detail, you can see that what are these 15% of unconsumed feed coming from? One, it could be that the water stability of the feed is no good. It immediately disintegrates, or the level of fines. These are very fine particles which comes in the feed, which are not available to the animal because it's too small to be picked up, or wrong size of feed is used, or the feeds are not palatable, are not attractive enough, and the animals are not able to detect and get to the feed. Right? Obviously, the undigested one, it depends on the quality of feed, nutritional quality. If it's poor in digestibility or nutrient imbalance, then a lot of feed taken in are not converted to flesh and is not ingested. These cause a problem with the pond water and pond soil, and therefore leading stressed. So this is some of the examples we have seen, and I'm sure most of you have seen some. Is that this graph on this picture on the left shows the organic matter left after production, after harvesting. As you can see, the amount of organic matter. So this is obviously a poorly managed farm. Nowadays, some farms use the siphoning method to remove organic matter even during the production, especially during near the central drain pipe, as you can see in this particular picture on the right. This is just an example to show you the impact of water quality during production, right? So this is just an example, and I've used an example which is, may not be so suitable for us right now because it's an example for a modern farm. But the point I want to make, of course, is that it is inevitable that with time, with production time, the water quality deteriorates, becomes poorer. If you look at example of COD, which is chemical oxygen demand, which is a measure of the organic matter in the pond, the nitrite level and the total ammonia levels all increase with time, with production cycle, the DOC. And the different columns here shows the different types of ponds, open pond, lined ponds, closed pond, and so on. So it shows that regardless of the type of ponds, with production time, the water quality deteriorates. This is another example, again, but this time to show you the impacts of stock intensity. L farm shows the lowest stock intensity, H farms a higher stock intensity of doubling the stock intensity. But you can see here of what also say, whether it's low or high stock intensity, the level of water quality parameters, in this case, total ammonia and nitrite, gets worse or increases with production time. So what impact does it have? It has the impact of stress. And as we all know, the stress can retard growth, causes stunning. It increases energy utilization, which normally would be used for growth, but now used to fight off stress. It causes reduced feed intake. And because of the reduced feed intake, less feed consumed, you now need more nutrients, and therefore leading to high FCR, feeding but no growth. And also, in a very severe cases, we can see that the stress actually results in illness. First, by suppressing immunity and reducing the capacity of the animals to fight diseases. Thirdly, it also releases some stress hormones or toxins, which actually causes cell inflammation in the body, which further suppresses immunity or increases the energy utilization and reducing growth as well. This one is just to show an example of what happened with stress. The study here chooses or chose the level of nitrite as one stress to show you the example what happened to the animal's immune capacity. Normally, we would look at the total hemocyte count as the immune capacity of the animal. So the ability to have high THC means that animals have higher capacity to fight off diseases. So we can see here the animals are exposed to different levels of nitrite of up to 20 parts per million. And the x-axis here shows the exposure to the exposure time to nitrite. As we can see here, the higher the level of nitrite level, except this particular one, the lower is the THC count, which means the lower immune response. And the longer is exposed to nitrite, the lower is the THC count as well. So exposure to the level of nitrite results in lower THC, and the longer the exposure time to nitrite, it makes it even worse. Okay, so we just an example here to illustrate the point about how stress can suppress immunity in shrimp. Okay, now we talk about selecting the type of feed. So how do we get the feeds to the shrimp? And again, this is a standard used by a lot of the prawn farmers. In fact, most of the prawn farmers. So I don't want to go into detail on this one, except to show us that there are a number of tools that are available to us. First one, of course, is we use feeding tables to help us decide how much feed to give to the animal, and then how do we control the amount of feed per day. Right, feeding tables are good, and normally is supplied together by supplied by the feed manufacturer for its individual products, and they are only good if they represent the nutrient requirements of the growth or the nutrient content of the feed. So if, for example, the company has different types or different grades of feed, then they would have different feeding tables depending on the nutrient content and on the nutrient requirement by the animals in that one. The problem, of course, is that, to use the feeding tables properly, you need to know the biomass. And this is where the problem comes, how do we accurately determine what is the biomass of the shrimps in that particular culture time? For example, what is the estimated survival rate at day DOC 60 or DOT 80 and so on? This is an example of a feeding table taken from the internet, from Jala. Thank you very much, Jala, for allowing me to do that. Then on this column here on the left, the white column called DOC, which is day of culture, ABW, which is the average body weight, and FR, which is feeding rate, which is percent body weight per day. So as we can see here, the younger shrimp or the early production cycle, the smaller is the feed, the animal size, and the higher is the feeding rate, and the feeding rate is lower as the animals grow larger. Remember that this feeding table is just a guide, and different farms will have different culture conditions and so on. So they would have to adapt the feeding rate depending on the farming situation. So it is to be used as a guide, not as the gospel. And of course, how frequent do we feed the animal? This is best illustrated by this particular graph, which shows that there is a direct relationship between, there's a direct relationship between the time the feed is available and the amount of feed that is consumed. So if you give them more time, the more the animal will consume. In this case, the grams of shrimp feed per day, per shrimp, compared to the time available for the animals to feed. So at 100, about 90 minutes, you get 0.1 gram per shrimp. At 2100 minutes, you double it. All right. So obviously, again, the farmers have already found this out. So there's no point for me to elaborate on this one. And therefore, most of the farms today have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 feeding times per day in order to to have a maximum time available for the animals to feed, but over different meals. The feeds are broadcasted from the pond side, and if the ponds are too big, maybe the boat can be used, or if there's a manual or labor problem, and to ensure that the feed are broadcasted, spread out over a large area, some automated broadcaster is used. And in some farms, this example here maybe from Ecuador, where the farm is very large, it have 1 or maybe hectares in size. They use a mechanical blower to actually blow the feed out, and the feeding tray is still used, not as the platform for feeding, but maybe as or mostly as a way to decide whether the feeds given are adequate, or enough, or not enough. Obviously, there's one way to give the feed to the animal, and as I show in my previous slide on the fate of the feed, if we do not give the feed properly to the animal, it can end in a feed, a pond which is full of organic matter. So there is a development to move to automated feeding devices, and again, these automated feeding devices have been used for a long time, and we can see the efficiency. We can see in my farm visits and so on that some farm uses automated feeders, some do not. So obviously it depends on the comfort level of the farmer, and see whether they are happy to use that and the benefits that they see. Okay, so it's not always, but as we can see, there are always developments in terms of improving feed supply, supply to the feed. Now, with automated feeder, of course, is that we eliminate the need for manual feeding, manual intervention in feeding and giving out feed. So we can use a fixed automated feeder, and we just fill up the silo, and it just happens over there. We don't have to go around the pond and so on. We can determine how much feeding intervals that we need to give to the animals. We have an actual control on the feeding time. It can be arranged over a 24-hour period if necessary, but most farmers do not feed during the night, over the night, and so on. But also it allows the integration of feeding with quality and amount of feed and so on, that in later on we can determine whether the feeding is successful or not, and it allows us to do many trials, how much to feed, how far to throw out the feed, and so on. So diagrams on the right shows you examples of what the automated feeders are like. For the future, there is a research, and this example here is already 10 years old, which shows that even during that time, people are starting to talk about the interactive auto feeder, which means that the animals themselves controls the amount of feed that to be given to them. And in this particular example, which is a system developed by AQI, they use the hydrophone system to detect the feeding behavior of the animals. And for example, if the animals continues to feed, they obviously makes the noise, which is picked up by the phone, which then converted to digital information, which then allows the feed to be continued to be given until the animals decide, or the animal stops feeding and there's no more activity and no sounds of feeding. Therefore, then the feed less feed is provided, and so on. So in this way, we actually allow the animal to control how much they want to feed, and theoretically, of course, you would then give a good consumption, and therefore can give a good FCR. This particular obviously a question is always asked, how efficient is each one of the system? And I've looked at tried to look for literature to actually support this in terms of a comparative trial done together, not picking up information from different farms. But so this is a trial, it may be not from a real commercial trial as such, but actually compares 3 different types of feeding together at the same time, which is the most useful one. So it compares hand feeding, timer feeding, which is automated feeder, and then the sound feeding, sound feedback system. So we can see here with each one of with hand feeding, The automated feeder is an improvement on hand feeding, and the sound interactive feeding is actually an improvement on the timer feeding. So this is the future of, if you want to go further to ensure that there is complete proper feed utilization. Okay, so I think that's all about the feeds and the feeding methods that I would like to talk about today. Just to summarize, I just say, in order to achieve optimal feeding, farm productivity, and therefore profitability, it is imperative that we choose the appropriate feed, and therefore employ the proper feeding strategy. So the feed obviously must be able to supply all the nutrients that the animal needs, and highly digestible, which means available to the animal. It must be the appropriate size and highly palatable in order for the animals to come to the feed quickly and not allow wastage, which can then exacerbate the situation. The appropriate feeding method must be used so that the feed are supplied sufficiently enough feed and also efficiently to ensure that all the animals actually have the same opportunity to take up the feeds. And because of the good feeding methodology, we reduce waste and therefore reduce the nutrient leaching and so on to enable the pond water quality and the pond bottom quality to be maintained, therefore reducing stress. So I think that's all for my presentation. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wee. Now we learn that the feed is very important. It's deliver the nutrients to the shrimp, but the feeding management, water quality control, and even the feeding machine is equally important, right? So I want to take actually one question from Indonesia. Okay, the first question is, what is the minimum crude protein that you recommend to the Vietnamite, the white shrimp?
Thank you very much, Alan, for the opportunity, and thank you very much for the question. I think if you look at what's available in the market, different feed manufacturers have different levels of crude protein in their thing. The question is, what's the minimum? So far, we have seen the companies providing, from 32 onwards and all the way up to 38 and so on. I think the most important is actually we need to consider the nutrient density. So obviously, with higher protein content, you'll have a feed which is higher in nutrient content. The other important thing to note, of course, is how do you feed to the shrimp? Because in any of the three methods that I just mentioned, the shrimp actually decides how much they want to feed. And then the farmer react accordingly and give them the. So the feed actually, the shrimp actually feeds to satisfy its energy and nutrient requirement. So therefore, in a feed which is lower in nutrient concentration, such as a feed with lower protein content, you end up with a higher FCR. Because the animals actually actively eat to satisfy the energy and nutrient content, right? And if you give lower nutrient content, therefore you need more feed, and therefore likelihood is that you get a higher FCR.
Yep. Thanks, Dr. Wee. So it's not only the crude protein contents, but the way of the feeding, and yeah, that's also equally important, right?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, I take another question from Vietnam. Is it possible for Vietnamese shrimp farmers to use the salt sensor, auto feeder effectively? How do you think?
Yes, I think that concept of interactive auto feeder has been around for quite some time, and there's been more and more developments. The issue, of course, is that, how do we implement it in a farm? And it's not a simple the requirement is actually a little bit more complex than what it seems. So you probably need access to proper internet and so on, and also need to be able to service the machines and so on regularly. So I think it is possible technically, of course, but I think we need to talk to the developer of such system. By the way, I only show one example from AQ1, but there are many other companies out there who can also do the same thing. So we need to talk to them about how it can be used in particular situations.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Wee. Well, I want to take the last questions because we have time limits. The last question again came from Indonesia, and what is your opinion if the feed was additive feeds or fermented feeds? What is your view on that?
Sorry, it's
additive.
Yeah.
Added the additive in the feed or fermented the feeds.
Okay. I think as the farmers know that it is at the moment quite a standard procedure. If we want to add additives to the feed if we want to supply additives to the shrimp, and one of the practical way, of course, is to top dress it onto a feed and then feed it to the shrimp. Yeah. So that's one way. Of course, that is not the best way because it involves, it's likelihood that the additives will be leached out, and you probably need a lot more additives than if we introduce the additives into the feed directly. So if it is needed, we talk to the shrimp feed manufacturers, and they might be able to put it into the feed, and then it comes as a part of the feed.
Yep, more precise. Comes to us, right? Okay. Again, thanks, Dr. Wee. Thanks for your participation and deliver such good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for this very insightful episode for our Agriconnect series Aquavantage. Today we already explored quite numbers of key areas. Demands of the shrimp increased quite well already, which is already a good sign for Asian producer. In the other hand, the Asian shrimp producer yet know more knowledge and gain more experiences in handling disease issues. That's also the good things. In line with this, our company GoCoin Fimico, especially our technical team, will continue support and assist our customers, providing the best quality of the feeds, the optimized nutrition, and as well as our technical services in the field. You may still have questions that, can I have all those copied today? Well, you can actually visit our website, the www.agriconnectseries.com, where we will upload all the sessions contents within just a few days with subtitle in various languages. So you can select language you prefer, and you can still revisit the whole session in the coming days. Okay, before we end, very important that we want to hear from your voices. We need your feedback. Please scan this QR code and complete this survey. It won't take too long. And our local representative, please assist our customer to fulfill those survey. If you still have other questions to the speakers, we can still pass to the speakers. Then we will come back to you later on. So feel free to continue your discussion, switch to your local languages, and enjoy your dinner. Okay, this has been Alan Wu. Enjoy your dinner, and thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.